For this fonts module in this Canva Box of Tricks series, we're going to have a look at how to add in text and then style them accordingly using the tools in Canva. We'll also cover a little bit of design theory and typography and give you some ideas of how to get the spacing right, both between characters in a font and also the line height, and how we choose the correct font and also the right balance of font selection within our designs. So we're going to jump in using a poster design. And I've got a blank canvas here, and I've got our starting templates on the left. And we're going to use templates because this will provide us with a good idea of how to work on fonts. So I'm going to select this chalkboard design. And we're going to solely focus on the font selection. First of all, let's talk through the different font options available. So if I copy and paste this text across, we're going to make it a little bit smaller, just so we can put the two text blocks alongside each other. And I can grab the handles on this bounding box to scale down. I'm not going to worry too much about getting them the same size. I would absolutely do that if this was a poster design that I wanted to use after this example. But we can see here, if I select the bounding box, we've got our font editing options across this toolbar on the top. So I could double check. So that's 114. Well, that wasn't bad doing it by eye. So you can see that it does help you a little bit because it'll snap to a point. But we've got the two text blocks with the font exactly the same size. What I could have also done is reduce the block and then right click and copy, then right click and paste the text block. I could also use Control-C and V to create the same effect. So now we've got two text blocks and we can use the snap into grid to align them so that they're both aligned and centered. What we're going to do now is start adjusting the font of this one just to see how it looks. So with that text block selected, let's have a look at the font options we've got available. If we want to, we can just get rid of the template window and give ourselves a little bit more breathing space. So instantly we've got a wide range of font options available. This can be quite daunting if you're just starting out. Our first port of call is what type of font do we want to create? What type of look are we trying to create? If we're going for a traditional look, we might look at serif fonts. Or for something more modern, sans serif font like this. The difference being, if I can find a nice serif font to use as an example here. There we go. So that's quite a modern serif font. Serif have all these serifs, which are little accents on the edge of the lettering. So you can see here the U has those 2 points at the top. We've got a sans serif font, which is generally seen as more modern, without those extra accents and details on the text. It can be a simple case of serif is generally more traditional, sans serif more modern. So that's the first thing to consider. Then we're thinking of font weight. So if we look at Rubric, which is quite a bold font, we can give the design more impact. And there is also a black version of that font, which gives you even thicker weighting to the text. A couple of rules that are good to go by when creating designs. One is we want to make sure that we get font consistency. Consistency is key. And we're looking at maybe 2, even 3 font types at most. So we're going to duplicate this design now, and we're going to show you the original, or close to the original. I should have duplicated at the start, so we've got the original design. What I'm going to do is just make this text block a little bit larger. By holding the Alt key, I can scale up from the center, which is really handy when we're just trying to tweak the design. And I'm also dragging that over to the center. And we can see it's 143. I'm going to go up to 150. Just because I don't like odd numbers. You don't need to do that. There we go. And we brought that to center. So now we know that we can create the second design, 150 font size, and drag it to center. Okay, so that went a little bit skewed there because we're looking at 150 font size. So if I just go back a step, and this can happen regularly. Because we're selecting a different font, you can see some of the weighting's different. Each character, even though it's the same font size, is actually taking up more space. So to counter this, sometimes we may want to just reduce the font size down until it fits. And that's our sweet spot. Or we could take it back up to 150. And finally, snap it into position. So by just increasing the bounding box around the text area, we can counter that issue with spacing. And that happens regularly. So now we have two quite different looks by just selecting different font sizes. You could then consider putting emphasis on one of the words. So we've got the underline tool as an option. And I wanted to add this in because it's starting to look a little bit cramped now. We can see the line height and that underline underneath the first word has made it a little cramped accordingly. So what we can do now is look at the spacing options. So I'll click on spacing, and we've got two options here. We've got the letter spacing. So again, this is another way if you're looking to fit a font into a smaller container than you're planning for, you could reduce the width. Obviously, if we increase it, we're going to be back to the same issue where it's overlapping in the bounding box. I'm just going to put that back to 0, which is default. I think there's a good balance for that. And generally, a good rule of thumb, again, is don't try to change the letter spacing unless there's a specific reason for it. Font designers are very particular about getting the spacing right, and their default settings will never cause you problems. We can also look at the line spacing, and this is what I wanted to show you. Might just increase it to 105. We can see that the line stays close to the first word, which is what we want. But now our line spacing is much clearer. I can now go and realign it to make sure that that's centered from top to bottom. Guides are a relatively new feature in Canva, and boy, do they make a difference, because it can just really help to give you that clarity when working with layouts. So I don't want to do too much at this stage. Just wanted to give you a short introduction to selecting new fonts, changing the size. We can also switch between all caps and lowercase. Even then, we've got a huge difference in terms of how it looks. But for this type of statement, we're going to go with all caps. And next up, we're going to have a look at some other features, like adding effects, potentially even animations if we're creating videos, and also adding color to our font. See you next time.